Today, I'm going to share with you a short excerpt from the Surangama Sutra, and it is about the nature of awareness. Before we start, I would like to share some background on Mahayana Sutras and compare it with early Buddhist sutras from the Theravada school. Surangama Sutra is a Mahayana Buddhist text used mostly by Zen or Chan monks in China. Some scholars think that the sutra was written by Chinese monks, and others think that it came from India but was heavily edited by the Chinese. Mahayanese texts tend to be written in a fantastical manner, meaning the Buddha is often portrayed to be accompanied by many devas, bodhisattvas, and arahants in fantasy settings. He is also often portrayed to be displaying his psychic powers in Mahayana texts. Although he also has psychic powers displayed in the early Buddhist texts of the Theravada school, it is not shown as often. The text on the right is a Theravada Nikaya, the sutta of the Theravadin school. It is the first collection known as the Digha Nikaya or Long Discourse of the Buddha. In Theravada suttas, each account often starts with "Thus have I heard," because the teachings were memorized by the Buddha's cousin and his personal attendant, Venerable Ananda, who had an impeccable and perfect memory. After the Buddha passed on into Parinibbana, Ananda repeated the teachings with "Thus have I heard." Mahayana Sutras also starts with "Thus have I heard." The key differences are in the setting where the story takes place. In the Theravada school, the stories are historical accounts of the Buddha as passed down by his students. The Mahayanis also start with "Thus have I heard," but they do not write about the historical account of the Buddha. Rather, they use all the historical names to create stories that bring across their message. Another difference between the Mahayanis and Theravadin schools are the chants which they use. Chanting is a tool used to calm the mind. Mahayana schools often chant the entire text of sutras, such as the Diamond Sutra and the Heart Sutra. In Surangama Sutra itself, the text contains a section of chant for protection. In the Theravada schools, chants are also lifted from the suttas, but instead of chanting the entire suttas, selected verses of the Buddha are taken. The most commonly chanted verses in Theravada schools is homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dhamma, and homage to the Sangha. You can see in the early text that there is homage to the Buddha, which the Theravada monasteries in Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, and Sri Lanka monasteries often chant. It goes like this: "The Blessed One is perfected, fully awakened Buddha, accomplished in knowing and conduct." And these are words of the Buddha himself. Before we delve into the Surangama Sutra, it would be useful to know how the teachings of the Buddha is classified. The collections of the Buddha's teaching is classed into what is known as the three basket of teachings, or Tipitaka in Pali. In Sanskrit, it's called the Tripitaka. The Tipitaka consists of the Vinaya Pitaka, or the collection of discipline for the monks and nuns in the community of the Buddha, the Sutta Pitaka, which contains the discourses of the Buddha, and the Abhidhamma Pitaka, which contains the systematic teaching or commentary of the teachings written by monks long after the Buddha's Parinibbana. And these are the four books of the Theravada school in the Sutta Pitaka. The long discourse contains accounts of the Buddha from an outsider's point of view. The middle discourse contains teachings of the Buddha from an insider point of view. The link discourse are teachings for the Sangha or community of monks and Buddhist practitioners. The numbered discourse contains the key teachings according to numbers. In the past, when the Buddha taught, there were no written books or printing houses in order to help his listeners memorize. He often used repetition and numbers. The Chinese Buddhists did a translation of the Theravada school's three baskets, and the discourses are known as the agamas. Mahayanese Buddhist teaching first spread from India to Central Asia and was later brought into China and then to Korea and lastly to Japan. The Mahayanese also has a huge collection of written works, and these works were written by Mahayana monks from India. The Abhidhamma or commentaries of the Mahayana schools are said to be a reaction and disagreement over the Theravada Abhidhamma being included in the Tipitaka. Other texts of the Mahayana Sutras are classed into these few collections. They are the Prajnaparamita Sutras, or the Perfection of Wisdom text, which includes the Diamond and Heart Sutra. There is the Saddhamma Pundarika Sutra, which is the Lotus Sutra used in the Tiantai and Nichiren schools in China and Japan, respectively. This sutra says that all paths, whether you are a solitary Buddha or an Arahant, it all leads to the perfect Buddhahood, or Sammosambuddho. The Pure Land Sutras includes the Infinite Life Sutra, Amitabha Sutra, and Visualization Sutras, often chanted in Mahayana schools, including Tibetan Buddhist schools. Then there is the Vimalakirti Sutra, which is also well known in the Mahayana schools. The Mahayanis differ from the Theravadins in that they do not agree that the Theravada monks isolate themselves from communities by going into the forest to practice asceticism. They think that this is opposite to what the Buddha did when he was teaching in India. The Buddha combined solitary practices by being in the community to help others awaken to their true nature. And Vimalakirti is a layman in this sutra who attained enlightenment despite living in the society. Then there is the group of Samadhi Sutra, where these sutras aid monks to attain high states of consciousness in meditation. Then there is the Avatamsaka Sutra, also known as the Flower Garland Sutra. It is a very long sutra explaining the interdependence of all phenomena. And then there is the Tathagata Garbha Sutras, sutras concentrating on the nature of Buddhahood. There are many more other collections of Mahayana texts which I will not touch on. These are the most familiar ones, and the Surangama Sutra belongs to the group of Samadhi Sutra. The content in the Surangama Sutra asks the question, where is the mind? Or where is awareness located? Is it inside or outside the body? Or is it everywhere? These are the questions pondered. Because the Mahayanis disagreed with the Theravadin schools after the Buddha's parinibbana, when schools started splitting up into different philosophical ideas, the Mahayanis often used Arahants to tell the stories in their texts, and the Arahants are often depicted unfavorably compared to Bodhisattvas. At the start of the sutra, Venerable Ananda, revered in the Theravada school as an Arahant for his dedication and intellect, is depicted as being inferior amongst the Bodhisattvas in the sutra. This is also because the Mahayanis believe in the attainment of Buddhahood, not Arahantship. In the Theravada school, an Arahant is enlightened, dependent on the words of the Buddha. But the Buddha did say that Arahants are equivalent to him in enlightenment, except the Buddha has more powers than an Arahant. You can say that the Buddha provided a direct path to enlightenment in the Theravada school in the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, instead of encouraging them to walk a much longer way towards Buddhahood. Earlier, I spoke about the 3 homages to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, which is often chanted in Theravada monasteries. And in the Surangama Sutra excerpt, which I'm going to share, talks about the nature of visual awareness. And from my observation, it seems to come from this verse, which is the chant or homage to the Dharma. The Dharma of the Blessed One is perfectly expounded, to be seen here and now, not delayed in time, inviting one to come and see, onward leading to Nibbana, to be known by the wise, each for himself. But what exactly is it that sees the Dharma? In the Surangama Sutra, the Buddha made a feast with his hand and asked Venerable Ananda, what is he seeing his feast with? The Venerable Ananda said, he saw the Buddha make a feast with his eyes. The Buddha then made an analogy and asked Ananda, if he did not have a hand, could he make a feast? Without eyes, can Ananda see? Are these two situations the same? Ananda replied that without his eyes, he would not be able to see. It is the same as not having hands, therefore you cannot make a feast. However, the Buddha said, these two are not the same. For example, it is indeed true that without hands, you cannot make a feast. But you cannot say the same that with no eyes, you cannot see. Why is that so? If you were to ask a blind man on the street, do you see anything? He would no doubt reply, all that I see in front of me is darkness. Now, imagine a man who is in a complete dark room. Is there a difference between the darkness seen by the man who is blind and the darkness seen by the man who can see but who is in a completely dark room? Venerable Ananda replied, no, there is no difference between the darkness seen by a person who can see, who is completely in a dark room, and the darkness seen by the blind. Suppose the blind man regains his sight. He would say his eyes caused him to see. By comparison, if someone turns on the lamp in the dark room for the sighted man, you would have to say by analogy, it is the lamp that caused the man to see, and not his eyes. Or you can say, the lamp simply reveals visible objects in the room, just as the eyes simply reveal visible objects for you. Therefore, it is the mind that sees, not the eye that sees. The mind referred here is our awareness. It is not our thinking mind. Continuing from the story that visual awareness is not the same as the eyes that see, King Prasenajit, a patron of the Buddha in Theravada texts, asked how he could come to realize his fundamental awareness that doesn't have a beginning and also does not perish. The Buddha asked the king if his body is indestructible like a diamond or if it is subject to decay. The king replied that in his experience, he sees changes and impermanence in his body. He sees thoughts arise and fade away. With each dying thought, he is convinced his body too will meet the same fate. He can see his body aging year by year, month by month, day by day. And if he were to look even closer, he can even see the body changing moment by moment. Therefore, he knows he would one day perish. The Buddha told the king he would reveal to him one thing that does not come into being and one thing that does not change or perish. The Buddha asked the king if he had ever seen the river Ganges. The king said that he had seen the river Ganges when he was 10 years old, 20, 30, 40, up to when he was in his 60s. The Buddha then asked him, even though his body has aged and wrinkled, has his awareness of the river ever changed through the years? The king answered no. The Buddha said, the body may wrinkle and one day perish, but awareness never age or perish. However, do not confuse awareness with consciousness. Consciousness is impermanent. It comes into being and perishes with every object that the ears, the eyes, the nose, tongue, body, and thoughts pays attention to. And with this, we have come to the end of today's lesson. Please do not simply believe or disbelieve what you see and hear on this video. In the spirit of free inquiry in Buddhism, please investigate and reflect on what is being said here and come to your own conclusions. Thank you very much.